Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is BattleCry Milestone 6. We're going to go over the milestone first as an introduction, and we don't have quite as much to go over this week. I apologize for my voice. I have been beating back the flu for over a week, so if you hear me coughing or what have you, I'm just apologizing now. So this week was mainly about enforcing game limits and setting up the shop and making sure that all of the creations around games are looking at what the player is currently doing, how many games they have going on in an effort to monetize the game. So a little bit of refinement around what are those limits, because we've had some discussion across the milestones of what's your active game limit, how many pending games should you be allowed to have, how many games should you be allowed to have when you're directly challenging another player. So basically the ultimate decision was, as long as you're challenging a specific player and that player has not yet accepted that direct challenge, you would not be able to challenge that player again until they accepted the first challenge. So rule one is I can really have as many pending, which means that the other player hasn't accepted yet, direct challenges as I want, but they have to be unique direct challenges against that player. We're not going to allow you just to spam a player over and over and over again. So they have to accept that game before you can issue another challenge. The second limitation is just general open-ended games. I'm just issuing an open challenge. Anyone can see it in the open games list. How many of those should I be allowed to have just sort of sitting out there? And we've come to the conclusion that 5 is a good. You shouldn't have more than 5 open challenges sitting in the list. And again, this is just sanity's sake. If we had, 10,000 players and we allowed all of them to have an unlimited number of pending challenges, the game list would just be unmanageable. So having 5 games out there open for people to join seems like a good number. And there's a caveat to that when we get to the active games, and I'll explain that when we go over it. So the final rule is how many active games, how many games can you actively have playing at a time? And that's where we're trying to monetize the application. So by default, all players get 5 active games. You can be in 5 games simultaneously playing and working out with the user or your opponent. When you get to 5, when you reach your limit, then you will not be able to create any new games even though they're pending. So even if you have not hit your limit of 5 pending games, but you have hit your limit of active games, on the game creation screen where you create a new game, we tell you you're at your max games and we won't let you create another one. This isn't really an enforcement around the numbers, as it is just a convenient way to notify the player of, hey, you're already in 5 games, so we just need you to be aware of that, and here's sort of upward pressure to convince you to buy. So if you were to create 5 pending games and then go join 5 active games, you could technically have all that open. But if you were to join 5 active games, it's not going to let you create a pending game until you've freed up one of your game slots, in which case you can create up to 5 open games again. Again, this isn't really trying to enforce that number so much as it is trying to bring awareness to the player that you're using the game quite a bit. You might want to go ahead and purchase a couple extra game slots. So at Nagware, take it for what it's worth. So we're enforcing game limits across all the lists based on those rules. We have wired up the shop for purchasing. Now it's not going out to the App Store shop and actually deducting money. We're sidestepping that. We're just making sure that we can purchase slots. We get 1, we get 5, we get unlimited. We're just testing that piping and making sure as I increase my maximum available games, it's enforcing that appropriately. allowing the friend challenges to occur. So now, very similar to what we had in the completed game, we're doing that on the friends list, and we're doing that on the high score list. So again, high scores, friends, and completed games do direct player challenges, following the rule of I can't have any more than one direct challenge that has not yet been accepted by a player. Same thing, confirm high scores are working, and then if you win the game, make sure your high score number goes up. We did a lot of that last week, but mostly this particular task was around finishing up the high score datum. The audio icons are the last two pieces that we're going to try to get into next milestone, where on the friends datum, audio icon is what was that player's last battle cry. Again, just trying to get me involved with my friends and my player, listening to their battle cries, neatness type of thing. On the high scores, the audio icon is meant to be what was their best battle cry. So that's going to do a little bit of data mining and look for what is the battle cry that generated the best units. So we had a little bit of debugging this week to validate all of that. So again, that just made sense to throw that into a later milestone. Enable challenging on the friends list and high scores. That's where I'm pulling things from backlog as they've hit the milestone list, so you'll see some crossover enforcing game limits. You'll see that again. So we've got some duplicate tickets. I just wanted to get them in here and make sure that they didn't have any verbiage in them that may have been unique to the actual task that we discussed and wasn't overlooking. Same thing, game limitation counting, just enforcing game limits. Confusion is new games are created and moved to pending. So now what we're doing is you create a pending game, it's building that focus to the list. So I create a new game and it's going to take me to my pending list, and we've actually added a little sticker to the new items. So we'll see that brings your attention to, hey, this is a new item in the list. There's still some downstream stretch options to help bring some uniqueness to the games and some immediate visual recognition of which game is which, but that's going to be in a later milestone as well. Same thing, after a pending or open game becomes active, it takes us to the active game list. So it's just, again, a more natural workflow for the player. Inform the challenger who goes first. So when you accept a challenge or you issue a challenge and we've got both battle cries, it lets you know, hey, Xander Bridges is going first, you get to go first. So that way you have a sense of, did I win the battle cry or not, type of thing. And a less than, hey, you lost type of negative reinforcement. It just tells you who goes first. The need to put a limit on the number of new games. So this is going back to the rule of how many pending games can I just open, pending games can I have open. We've just agreed that 5 is a really good benchmark there. More than 5, you're really just spamming the open game list. And then the other big one is we've, over the milestones, been noticing some bizarre behavior around the battle cries, inconsistencies or patterns that shouldn't be there from a progression standpoint. So we created a visual debugger. The only way to really see it is in the game and play. So the first video, we're going to start with this one since we're going to be in this environment, playing through the Unity IDE. So that way we can see that debugging and see how we're interacting with it. So let's go ahead and take a look at this one first, and then we'll dive in. So let's hit play. I think I've got some open games. I do. All right, so let's play this one. All right, good. Looks like I've already taken all my turns on this game here. All right, should have just let's end my turn. Yeah, let's do this one. All right, so this is basically a new starting game. I'm going to attack this. I'm not going to worry about all the buffs at this point. We're really just testing the battle cry. Blah 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 blah. All right. So what I'm going to do, you'll notice I've got some debug output here. So it's showing me I've got 24,000 samples. The infantry result value is 246. We see that up here. The result location is 181. That'll make more sense when we dig in here. Here's my infantry wave. Here's my result. So I'm going to go to my FT samples. Sorry, my brain's not 181. Okay, so I'm going to go down here to 181. Let's grab this thing. Oop, too far. Oh, there we go. All right, so that becomes our number, and the formula. Do I have a calculator on this thing? All right, well, grab your calculator. You can do the math at home. So the number is, clear this, is going to be 0.0132156, and the first version is to multiply that by 1,000, so times 1,000 equals 13.2156 times 20 equals 264.13. So we're integer based, and that is how we're getting the 264. So we're getting confirmation these are our visual samples. So let's just look at how this looks from the editor perspective. So these are the actual samples. Let me zoom out here a little bit and put it on that so I can move it. I'm going to put it down here. It's a little bit more visible. So these are the various chunks of the overall BattleCry. So the yellow is the actual unadjusted audio record. So that's just the samples. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn off the audio, and turn off the audio. Alright, so we're going to zoom in here and look at, this is the FFT transformation, so I can now move these a little bit closer and dig in a little bit just to get a sense. Now as we're getting a lot closer here, you can start to see. Let me just bring them a little bit closer together. In fact, let me just put that 30. That way we know they're lined up. 30 and 30. And then I'll just bring it down. So ultimately, what one of the critical bugs was that, and I'll show you here in the infantry piece when we open the samples, is that we were generally getting, and the problem is I've already fixed a lot of this stuff, so I was getting a whole bunch of zeros at the start of the recording, and there appeared to be just no way to get around that. It would always start off as 0. And on the archers at the very end, we'd end up having these trailing zeros. And I don't remember if I cleared that out or we got that taken care of. Yeah, so I left these in here because what I ultimately ended up doing is we were doing an average, and all of these zeros, and this would range from 6,200 all the way out to it'd be somewhere between 1,200, 500. It was just this random block at the beginning and end of just zeros, and because I was working from averages of these values, those zeros were skewing it considerably. So I went to a different approach, which essentially is achieving the same goal for me, is rather than doing the average, I did basically give me the ceiling. Let's look at these from an absolute value perspective and give me the longest one. Now, is in the sense of the visual debugger, what that means is which one of these lines is the absolute largest within this audio file, and as it goes through. And that's what this result location is. It's saying is I've gone through, not the samples, the FTP or FFT samples. As I go through these, I'm looking for the absolute value calculation. Which one of these is the biggest? And then from there, implementing my calculation and that's where we're getting from the infantry is this, and the resultant is 283 for cavalry, and the result value is 82 for archery. And it becomes fairly obvious as you zoom in and out that if I were to look at all three of these, the cavalry and the infantry are fairly close in the way that they look. It starts to trail off, right, because it's an FFT transform, so you're going to see that type of nomenclature constantly, just to overlay the audio. Oops, did I mess up my what happened to my audio? Did I scale it? Did I do something weird to it? Oh, there's a huge front. So this is that front tail piece I was talking about, where it's the audio is very, very weak at the beginning of the recording, and I just think that that's an artifact of either when I was recording it, I was quiet at the beginning and it kicked in. There's a outstanding issue for putting a timer up there to let me know. And that might ultimately resolve this, but I've been seeing this as even if I'm screaming long before the audio kicks in, there appears to just be this front load of nothing. So, but as we go back to just looking at the FFT transform, it becomes fairly clear which one of these and their values. Oh, I guess it helps if I show it. Which one of these are pretty much in alignment with the other one. So this is fairly consistent with and just make sure they're all on the same Z plane. This one isn't. So let me zero that and bring it forward. There we go. That'll make it look a little bit better. And again, throughout all of this, we're looking for which one of these is the most significant reading as far as the FFT is concerned. And what this does is this actually creates a sense of consistency where I'm producing a very similar battle cry and I'm getting a very similar result. In this formula, the maxed out units that I'm able to conjure is 2,000 of any of them. And throughout a lot of the analysis of multiple battle cries, I've come to the conclusion that I just have a natural drop off when I do my battle cry, which is causing a diminished archers. So, but the point is it gives me a something to start to train around, right? A way to improve it. So that's the visual debugger. This becomes my output here to let me know which one of the samples was designated as the best. What was the resultant value? It gives me the ability to actually dig into those samples and address that value and come up with the results on it. And then it also gives me the ability to do just a visual gut check across either the reads themselves or the transform of the fast Fourier calculation, and be able to keep that in a very consistent progression at the very least for generating your battle cries. So that's issue 2990, create visual debugger for BattleCry. This is the introduced version of this, so looking forward to feedback to see if there's other ways we can spin or look at this. I still need to be able to run this across a large sampling of 20, 30, 40 battle cries and see if I'm seeing any inconsistencies. But again, the anomalies that were detected were the front loading of the 0 samples that were loading up at the beginning and at the end of the entire recording, which was skewing the average. There was a part, so let's go back up to the game control. do combat. Let's do record. I'll show you the code around it. Process recording. So one of the things that I was doing early on, this is the original formula, was some shenanigans where I was trying to bring the values into a normal range prior to processing them, right? And that was just creating wildly unpredictable results. So, so now we're basically just demoting the audio sample as is into the various batches and then processing them. And then once we're done processing them, this was again some shenanigans in an effort to bring it to a visible state, and we have settled on this after processing formula to normalize it. And doing it that way has added predictability to the system, which is ultimately what we were going for. As far as the ability to visualize it, I found this little snippet of code out on the Unity forums, and I adapted it quite a bit to be able to be useful for me. So when it basically came in and was doing a resolution of 60, where it was dividing the batch into groups of 60 and playing it, and that wasn't nearly granular enough. I wasn't able to back into the exact selected sample and then from there determine, based on my formula, am I getting the same results manually that I would be getting in code. So this was the built-in piece just to make it less, it's, as you can see from playing in it, it can get quite cluttered in there, but it still did what I needed to do. So I've got all 8,000 samples in here so that I can actually see each and every sample and determine that it is in fact doing what I'm expecting it to do. Otherwise, it's on the update, it's basically using this debug draw line to output these audio files, and this is the FFT audio, and this is the raw audio. So that's the visual debugger in a nutshell, and the code around how we're making that work. This is something we're going to continue to use throughout the rest of the milestones, just to continue to confirm and validate that we're getting what we're expecting to get. Okay, thank you, and we'll take a look at our next issue. Enjoy. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is Milestone BattleCry 6, and we're going to take a look at the following issues. These are very short issues, so I'm going to group a handful of these together and we'll go through it in the single game. So we're going to talk about enforcing the various game limits. We talked a little bit about that in the introduction. We're going to show how we've wired up the shop, and as we're taking these steps closer to actually turning on a live asset shop at the various Play stores, you're gonna see the little initialization concerns. Hey, your products are set up, so we'll go through that. We're going to allow friend challenges to occur, high score challenges to occur. We've already seen completed games, but we're going to see it in respect to enforcing the game limits to how many of each you can have now, and just generally look around at the limitation on active games, how many pending games, and then how many direct challenges. So let's go ahead and go into the game. Alright, so for those tracking, issues 2957, 2958, 2959, 2960, 2915, and 2920 are going to be addressed during this portion. And again, they're just very, very closely related to one another. So at this point, you'll note that I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I've got a total of 6 active games. So if I go to my new game, you'll see you're at your maximum of 6 games. So I must have purchased one, and my ability to create a new game is grayed out. I can't create a new pending game. Now again, that has nothing to do with the actual number of pending games that I have. And let's prove that point by coming in here and surrendering this game. Okay, so at this point I've now got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 games, and it's saying I've got 5 of 6 maximum games. As you can see, I can create another pending game, but let's see how many pending games I've got that are not directly towards another player. So I've got Nick, I got POI, I got Xander Bridges, so I've got 1, 2, 3, 4. So I should be able to, based on our rules, create one more pending game, but I should not be able to create another one. This is the last pending game that I can create. This is the last pending game that I can create. And you'll notice it brought me over here to pending games. I've got my new stickers, so I'm sure it's not the Xander Bridges one, so I'm down to it's 1 or 2 of these. Making another game, making another game. This is the last. But I am now at my maximum 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And these are all direct challenges here at the top. So I should not be able to create another one. Maximum of 5 open challenges per player. So it is stopping me from creating a new open game, but it is acknowledging that I'm at 5 of 6 of my maximum games. Now again, that's not going to stop me from trying to challenge here. Blah, 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 blah. Blah, 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 blah. Xander Bridges goes first, and it's taking me to my active games because I had an open active game. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 going on at the same time, and this is the one that was just created by me. Blah 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 blah. Or I guess it could have been this one too. Blah blah. So again, we're still working on that piece. And under the new game, I'm back to you're at your maximum 6 games. I can no longer create a game. So if I come over here, I think I have pending challenges. Let me double check. Let's assert. Yeah, I've got a pending challenge open to Nick, and I've got one open to Xander. So I should not be able to create any more. So you already have a pending challenge with this player. And then let's see what I got. And I've already got a pending challenge with this player. So let's go to completed games. Let's find someone I've never worked with before. Hearthdale 1. Let's see if I can get him on there. And then let's blah 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 blah. And it has taken me to my pending games, and I now see my new game with Hearthdale 1 and my sticker. So again, there is no real limit to the number of pending games I can have to unique players that are open and pending. We are at a maximum of 5 open challenges that I can have, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These guys down here, which are stopping me, and then of course I'm being held to the number of active games that the shop has purchased for me at this point. So if you go to the shop, you'll get on initialized, and this is just because in the actual App Store you'll see it on the Android as well. I don't actually have the products, but that's not going to stop us from moving forward on this. So I can decide to purchase another game slot. Yes, and it says you're all set. Okay, I'm now 6 of 7 games, and I should be able to add another game. I don't see that I have one available, so I'd have to get another player to take a look at that. But as you'll notice, it's opened back up my ability to create pending games because I'm 6 of 7, but because I have 5, it's not going to let me do it. So we've seen the ability to create challenges directly from the friends list, create challenges directly from the high scores list. We've been able to create challenges from the completed lists, but I'll try that again. You already have a pending challenge with this player. And then we're enforcing how many active games I'm allowed to play, and then how many pending or open challenges I'm allowed to play, as well as how many direct challenges I'm able to make against a single player. So that's issues 2957, 2958, 2959, 2960, 2915, and 2920. So let's take a quick look at what this looks like in the code. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is Milestone 6, BattleCry, and we're going to look at a follow-up to issues 2957, 2958, 2959, 2960, 2915, and 2920. So we just saw the enforcement of those limitations in the creating of all those games from the player Hearthdale. So now we want to look at how do those game limitations impact the other player. So let's go ahead and log in. And I'll log in as Xander. And if we remember, Hearthdale had 6 of his 7 active games, but he was full up on his pending games. So if I look at Xander, he's got 5 active games currently. He is at his maximum. There is a pending game that is targeting him, but he can't join it because he's at his maximum. And there are open games available to join, but again, he can't join those because he's at his maximum. So let's go to the shop and let's that's fine. And let's get him bumped up. Okay, so he's now at 5 or 6. And you'll see that all my games have now come to life. I can now actually join the direct challenge game, or I can join any one of Hearthdale's open games. So in this case, we know that Hearthdale had room for one more. Xander's got room for one more. But the point of this is to show you what would it look like from the other player's perspective if the player I'm about to challenge hits their maximum. Because these are all Hearthdale's pending games. Consuming Hearthdale's last active game. Consuming Hearthdale's last active game. Hearthdale goes first, that's good. And it's taking me over to my active games, and I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's right, you're at your maximum. So when I look at open games, it now tells me that there are currently no open games. And what it's done is it's saying, okay, it's great that Hearthdale has 4 open challenges out there, but he's currently at his maximum. So we're not going to show you open challenges from him because he's at his maximum games. If Hearthdale were to go in and complete one of his games, boom, those 4 would pop back up. On the pending challenges, I'm still going to see that there's a pending challenge, but it's gray. So it's either gray because I'm at my maximum, or it's gray because Hearthdale's at his maximum. But I will see that there's a challenge pending that I can get once I've either freed up my games or Hearthdale has freed up his games. So this is kind of the other side of the equation. When it comes to open games, there's no point in even putting them in the list if the player doesn't have any open game slots. Their pending games will just have to be pending until they have a free active game slot. Okay, so that's the game limit enforcement from an opponent's perspective. Thank you. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is Milestone 6, BattleCry, and we're going to review the code and implementation of issues 2957, 2958, 2959, 2960, and 2915, and 2920. So we saw from the screencasts Hearthdale coming in and being restricted and limits being enforced for all of those games. We also saw Xander being able to log in and see only what he should be able to see. So if the opponent was at maximum games, there was no point in even showing an open challenge to someone you can't challenge, and as well as being to continue to see direct challenges, but being grayed out, so you can't initiate the challenge if either you or the opponent is at their maximum games. So we're going to start in team systems and looking at the SQL side of this. So there were Excuse me. There were some changes regarding the player. We turned in the player itself, we have turned the maximum game counter into a first-class citizen. So it is now going to be a primary column rather than in the device info. And that primarily was due to some of the mining of data, cracking open XML on a record-by-record basis, and some of the queries was just too slow. So the original plan of having all that stuff stored in XML, that's good for just atomic reads and grabs, but when I'm trying to do 2D by RBAR, just too intensive for SQL Server. So there's two pieces. What we're really storing on the players is their max games. That's what they've purchased as far as total maximum available games that they can play at any one time. And once they purchase that, we store that as a first-class citizen as part of the player record. The second piece is really a calculated column. So this is where we're getting into, we're mining data as we're asking for the player. So what it's doing is it's doing a left outer join out onto the battles themselves, looking for games that match this player. And it does the same thing for the challenges. So what it's doing is it's coming up here as it's sending it. It's summing these two values together. Oops, sorry. It's summing these two values here together, and they collectively are the total number of active games. All the games that I'm active in where I'm the aggressor, and all the games I'm active in where I'm the challenger. So while I have maximum games, which is stored at the database, this is a calculated value. So the data model at the middle tier is storing that value in the model, but it doesn't get stored down to the database. We look it up and calculate it real time. And hopefully that'll minimize any kind of concurrency issues if someone's trying to play on multiple devices, or multiple players are trying to join a game. So you'll see when we get into the code, I don't really continue to count up except for in one place for debugging purposes, but ultimately that's going to change as well, where I just say you're at your maximum of X games. That's ultimately going to be the message. But I can see instances where, you know, two players at the exact same moment try to join the challenge. At that point, it's already past the gatekeeper to see whether they have it, and poof, this player now has 6 when they should have only had 5. I'm not going to sweat that. That's the amount of wire up required to stop someone from sneaking in an extra game is just really not worth the extra code, in my humble opinion. But we'll address it if needed. So essentially, there was an upgrade to the get players stored procedure that is basically doing these outer joins back onto the game and counting how many active games they are. So when I ask for the player record, it says here's their maximum games, here's their active games, and that sort of allows me to drive some of the metric. The other big change was on the getting games. So I wanted to be able to control either visibility of the data completely, or just the interactability, the enabledness of the play button on some of the lists, depending on the player who's viewing it versus the player involved in the game and the datum, what their current maximum to active games ratio is. So to achieve that got a little bit more challenging than I expected it would. So not a big deal up here, but in this becomes the we're having to essentially union the same select statement on the battles for aggressor with the same select as challenger, because for each one of these games I want to know what the total number of active games are for the player that's the aggressor, and I want to know the total number of active games for the player that's the challenger. So the simple answer here is to essentially run the select twice, union them together into a single select, and then do a sum on the results, grouping by challenger ID or grouping by aggressor ID, whichever the case may be. So what this does is, inside the select list, this gives me on a per game basis, this gives me the ability to call out to my players max games, and I'm going to call it C max games for challenger max games, and C num games, which is the challenger's total active games, and then the same thing for the aggressor's total active games and the total player's maximum game. So that's this piece here. We do a left outer join, and I'm just surfacing that data per game. And so each one of the game records is going to be able to identify for the aggressor and the challenger where they are within their game limitations. And essentially, we just upgraded the data model to support these two essentially calculated columns for challenger and two calculated columns for the aggressor. So they get stored in the data model at the middle tier. So we'll take a quick look at that. And then they get passed on into Unity. So let's, and again, as usual, I have to close out of this before I can open up my web services project. So we'll let that load up. And as you can see here in my model, so this is my battles model that is serialized and sent up to Unity. Here are my two new calculated columns that I'm tracking and submitting. And in my values, I'm now pulling that right out of the data set and loading it right onto the data model, serializing it, and sending it out. So it's not a lot of extra heavy lifting. Do the same thing on the players. Here's the extra column coming up from the database, and then here it is being mapped to the player object, added to the list, serialized, and returned to Unity as the callback as a serialized JSON object. So now that I'm able to get what is the current maximum assigned to the player, and I'm able to determine how many active games they have, that gives me basically everything I need to manage my lists, manage my buttons, put hazard codes around them, any of that stuff. So we'll take a look at how we're doing that in the code. So again, for all of our lists, we have our load objects, and then we have our set objects. So let's take a look at our load open objects. So this is our at the end of our callbacks, this is all the data that comes back for our games. At this point, I'm parsing out my new values, my aggressor's number of active games and the max, and the challenger's number of active games and the max, and making sure that both of these need to be less than their maximum games. If they're more than or equal to, because open games aren't active games, right? They're games that other people can challenge. We want this number to be less than. And again, since the challenger is more often than not, we use the same logic in the pending, is more often than not decided yet, this is okay. So this, we collapse this side of the function if it's just open challenge. Otherwise, this side works into play if it's a targeted challenge. So this stops it from showing up, but in the case of now I need to guard against me, so I've guarded against the other opponent. I'm not going to see any of his challenges if he's already at his max games, but this gives me the ability to say, hey, what is my active games from my player object, and what's my max games? And as long as my active games is outside the number of my max games, then I should be able to go. So if I'm greater than or equal to, I'm going to set this interactability to false. I'm going to turn or disable the button, so to speak. So that just stops me from being able to go ahead and join a pending game if I'm already at my maximum live games. And it's a very similar for pending. I do the same thing. At this point, there's an OR condition, so if either of these guys are at their maximum game, so if Harthdale's at his maximum or Xander's at his maximum for a targeted pending game, go ahead and turn it off. We're not going to allow anyone to join it. So this just becomes pretty straightforward after that. All right, so on the creating of a new game, very similar process. So what it's doing here is it's setting the action is false on a pending game for creating a new pending game. I don't care how many active games you have other than disabling this button because you're already over your maximum, right? That's the only piece I'm worried about. But if that button is open, if you're not over your maximum, what I need to do is I need to load your number of pending games. We're going to go to the check pending callback. And then I'm going to count these, and if I'm greater than or equal to 5, I'm just going to break out. Otherwise, I'm going to go ahead and allow you to record your battle cry and move forward. And this sort of allows the player to interact with his new game, create pendings up to 5, regardless of where he's sitting from his active game perspective. This is enforcing the awareness rule, and again, it doesn't matter that I may not have 5 pending games. In this case, I just wanted to be able to control the interactability of that button if for any reason you're at your maximum games. And this is just sort of a soft sale to the user of, hey, you're at maximum games, you need to go ahead and purchase some more games. So that controls that. Our key for unlimited play is 9999. We'll take a look at that in a bit. So very similar to, let's look at our load friends, and then load friends basically is showing you all of your friend information, and then your set friends is where the crux of it comes into place, whether or not you're able to go ahead and do another one. So it does the same thing. I'm checking to see whether or not I have reached my pending limit for this specific player. So in this case, here's my check pending limit, and if I already have a pending game for that player, then I'm going to break. Otherwise, it does not have a pending challenge, so I'm going to go ahead and let you issue a pending challenge. And this is for the direct challenge piece, right? So this is on a friend, and that logic is exactly the same thing for the set high score data. And we'll go down here, process recording. And this is our check pending callback. It does the same thing. Do I already have a pending game with that player and that hasn't been turned into an active game? And if I do, then sorry, you already have a pending challenge. Otherwise, go ahead. That's good. I'll let you do that and get that pending game out of the way. So the max games and how many current active games you have, that's critical for accepting a challenge and being able to convert it to active. The direct challenge is controlled by you can't have more than one. So if I find one, we're done. And then of course the pending challenges, as we saw on the set pending. Let's see, there we go. Set pending is making sure that you don't have more than 5. And it pretty much is going to be working the exact same way. Begin recording. Oh, I'm sorry, that's in the create new game. So the set, once I've already got it created, that's whether or not someone can join it, is set up here in the counts of 5. So that's basically the enforcement of the games in a nutshell. Let's take a quick look at the ability to purchase these items. So again, we're using the boilerplate Unity IAP code base that they've given us. So I've augmented that to be able to manage and control visibility. We've got another issue that'll dig in a little bit deeper on that. But I go ahead and do all the initialization and have wrapped up the construction of all the products. But what I'm doing right down at the buy is, rather than running this code, which is going to try to purchase it from the store, I've moved this up, apply the purchase. But technically, if the purchase was successful, which is down here, the results, I would apply purchase at this level, or apply purchase unknown, which just pops up, oops, something went wrong. So this is essentially all wired and ready to go. Just need to go to each one of the app stores, create these product IDs in their listing, get it through the App Store validation, and then comment this out, comment this in, and we're now live on the App Store. Okay, so let's just take a quick look at the issues. We see we're enforcing game limits. We've wired up the shop. As we go through others, we'll show you the buying of 5 and the buying of unlimited. We've allowed friend challenges to occur. High scores are working and challenges are occurred. Enabled to challenge friends in high score lists. Game limitation counts. The confusion around the new games. We did kind of see this, but we'll dig back in and take a look at that. And then after a pending or open game becomes active, switch to the active player games view. So we saw some of that switching, but we'll do it deliberately as well. And inform the challenger who goes first. We saw that, but we'll go back through and do a deliberate video on it. And need to put a limit on the number of new games. This one we did see. This is limiting how many active games you can have to 5 open challenges. So 2, 9, 3, 8 we did see. So let's go back in and take a look at the new player game sticker, making sure that we're switching from specific views as are expected when you create a new game, when you accept a challenge, that you're going to the appropriate view. All right, so that's this grouping of issues, and we'll take a look at the next set of issues right after this. Thank you. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is Milestone 6 BattleCry, and we're going to take a look at issues 2930, 2934, 2936, and we've already seen issue 2938, but we'll review it again. So in 2930, we're trying to address confusion around the creation of new games. So at this point, I have an open challenge here that I can do for Hearthdale that will appear in my active game list. But what we wanted to do is really kind of move to the appropriate list, and whenever I join an open game, and the same thing on creating a new game. If I create a new pending game, I would like to go to the pending game list and see it. So let's do that. This is a new pending game. This is a new pending game. Alright, so you'll see that it went over to the pending list. I've got my little new game sticker, and all that means is that this game has been in the pending list for less than 3 days. So if it's 3 days or longer, you don't get the sticker. Right now I've got 3 stickers in my active games, and I've got one in my pending. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to join the game that doesn't have a sticker, so you can see that it will get a sticker when it moves over to the active games. Creating a new active game. Creating a new active game. Hearthdale goes first, so it's identifying who won that challenge, which is good. And you'll notice at the bottom there, since Hearthdale goes first, you'll see that creating a new active sticker. And essentially what that means is, as I'm moving it from lists, well, not necessarily pending and open list, but to active or creating a new pending or open item, I'm updating or managing that created date so that we see the sticker pop up. So we're now able to identify games younger than 3 days old. We're properly navigating the list, or putting the user in the list that is relevant to the workflow or action they just completed. The same thing happens when we do a direct challenge. It takes us to the pending list. Same thing for high scores, same things for friend list. So the other thing we hadn't got a chance to look at is right now I'm at 6 of 8, so I'm just going to create one more, and that takes me to 6 of 9, so that looks right. And I'm going to create 5 more, and that takes me 6 of 14, that looks right. And then I'm going to go ahead and spring for the unlimited, and I now have unlimited games. And essentially under the hood, that's just, I have 9,999 games plus. Anything over that is considered to be unlimited. So that's essentially list navigation, taking you to the appropriate list contextually. The fact that we have new stickers, so right now I've got 4 showing in my active, and I've got 3 showing in my pending list. So I should be able to see 7 less than 3 day entries in the table. So we'll take a look at that. And I was able to create unlimited games by basically purchasing the games, and you'll notice that the buttons are no longer available. I can't, after I've purchased unlimited games, I can't continue to purchase more games. All right, so let's take a look at this in the code and see how we did it. Hello, my name is Evan Schwartz. This is Milestone 6 for BattleCry. And the first thing we're going to take a look at is how our new sticker is showing up. So this isn't exactly how it works, but this gives us a pretty good loose idea from the database. I'm comparing created to get date, not really update, so I guess I could do it this way to make it more consistent the way it works in the code. But since all these were created today, it's Moxnix. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 that are less than 3 days old, which means I should have 7 stickers. And we just saw from Xander he had 3 in his pending list and he had 4 in his active game list. So essentially, this is how we're managing that from the data perspective. Looking at that in the code itself, we'll look at the loads. So let's do a load pending. And in the loads, we're using a time span. So I'm taking created on and converting it into an actual date object and doing a time span against now to see if it's less than 3 days. So it can't be 3, it has to be less than 3. And that determines whether or not you see your sticker or not. And we see these basically at the tops of all of these lists. So all the lists have the ability to say whether it's new or not new. And we manage it this way. So the other piece is in the, let's just say, set open, and we're going to process our recording. One of the things that we identified was it's now telling us who goes first. So after I've done my battle cry, it ranks challenger and aggressor, and if the aggressor is greater than the challenger goes first. Otherwise, it's you that goes first. Pretty much the same thing here in the pending. Process the recording, goes through, and this one's a little bit different because it's going to have players on both sides. So it actually says, you know, hey, the challenger went first versus the aggressor, so it's going to put their names up there and show their names. Other than that, we're now looking at, well, hey, it's tracking to the appropriate list. Let's follow this little path here a little bit, and not the BattleCry one, but set pending. So I'm now trying to do the go to active list, and let's go to the open, and let's follow that crumb trail, micro, and say player delayed action. That's that rigmarole we did last week, and it's also going to active, and then let's look at our create new game. Yeah, where it's going to pending. All right, so this is all coming out of our menu manager, and even though on the open pending it's going to the holder, so if we said load pending and the holder is pulling there's a, just do it, go to active, here we go. It's grabbing the menu manager and going to active. So they ultimately come here to the same thing, and this is just a central little piece of code that's holding all of these buttons and then invoking them. So as you know, I've got my top row of commands. The battle button is the first one, and then under the battle button I got a whole bunch of active, pending, open screens. So essentially what it's doing is it's invoking the battle button to switch to the battle panel, and then invoking the appropriate sub button to switch out the panels. So this just makes it real nice to keep that code or that functionality localized under the button. I can make the change in the button, then all of this stuff carries over. Alright, so that is confusion around the new games. We saw that we're now going from pending to active, or from new games to pending. We saw that we were in a pending list or open list going to active. We saw our new sticker and what's causing that to pop up. And we're informing challengers as to whose turn it is. So it's just not a end. It goes you won or they won, it's your turn kind of thing. We already saw putting limits on pending games, creation of new games. You can't do more than 5, and we've already seen the visual debugger. So that's Milestone 6 in a nutshell. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I look forward to our next milestone. Thank you.